Today's session is the first of our four-part series on quality management. Today, we're going to be talking about how we fix document control. So we're going to be tackling the missing versions of documents, the approval delays, and a couple other elements when it comes to basic document management around QMS. I'm your host for today. My name is Jamie Priest. I am a regional sales director here at DocuWare. Some of you on the call may know me, some of you might not, but nonetheless, thank you all for joining. A couple of housekeeping rules. Just there is a chat window available for you, so I'd encourage you to ask as many questions as you possibly can. There is also a hand sign. However, I will stop at intervals and probably even for a longer period of time at the end of the webinar to discuss questions and give you some answers to those. Very, very simple agenda for today. Okay, so we're going to just discuss a couple of industry trends, and I suppose these are general industries out there, such as manufacturing, construction, automotive, that kind of thing, but also just the quality management industry and what that means to people from different environments. So then we'll go through a couple typical pain points, and then we start talking about how DocuWare starts addressing these pain points and what the actual benefit and value is of addressing these pain points with a solution like DocuWare. That leads straight into our demo. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation about success stories that we've recently had, and then there will be a Q&A at the end. All right, so if we jump straight into it, document control and how we fix that, it shouldn't really be a daily battle, but for many of us, we know we've got scattered files, we've got approvals that take forever, we've got no idea who's looking at the latest version of a document, or even if there is a latest version of a document, we don't know. It's very difficult to see in some environments. So when we look at DocuWare, we want to sort of bring a lot more order, a lot more structure, a lot more process to that. All right, we want to start by centralizing documents. So everything from your SOPs to your technical drawings. We want to make sure that they're fully version controlled, fully auditable, and always up to date. So no more duplication of documents, no more multiple endless drill downs of folders, no more copies lying around your entire PC. We want to centralize and we want to streamline that. So then we start looking at automating and automating your approval workflows, and of course the assignments of those approvals, when approvals are due, when documents or information needs to be escalated, what are the conditions for that, how the approvers are notified, and how that whole process is tracked, really. That's when we go from digitizing and centralizing our information to creating some automation within our process. So that means you get full visibility from the draft of a document right through to the sign-off. And then when audit time comes around for everybody, no matter what industry and no matter what type of audit it is, everything is traceable, everything is in a structured place. And that is ultimately the beginning of how we start to fix document control. I'm going to skip on through to the next slide. Right. So if we look at a couple industry trends, okay, what the industry in terms of QMS and quality management is starting to require, it's for us to look at real-time collaboration of information, okay? That, again, in a lot of environments, very difficult when information is scattered all over the place. A lot of the collaboration takes place either face-to-face on Teams or via email. We want a place where we're able to bring those remote teams together and give them the opportunity and give them the possibility of collaborating using a solution. The mobility of the workflows. So we want people that are out on the floor or driving around or not necessarily in front of a workstation. We want them to have the ability to still approve a task that is assigned to them. And this is really just what the industry is expecting, is because everybody is so remote and so distant that traveling and being away from a centralized place is so common. We need that ability for people to action things on a mobile. The audit readiness I've spoken about. Okay, so this is again something with the industry is talking about is, how do I remain auditable and fully audit ready all the time, not just in preparation for an audit or spending a lot of time preparing for an audit. How do I remain audit ready all the time? And then, of course, data. We'd want to talk about documents essentially as data, but how do we use that data more effectively? How do we track that data? How do we report on that data? And how does that contribute to compliance? There are a couple other talking points there, but those are just a few things that I wanted to mention. And of course, I want to lead on to, like I said in the first slide, what does quality management mean in different industries? So in manufacturing, potentially, it means zero defect production. All right, you want to keep a very controlled process with traceable documents so you don't get returned goods. That's ultimately what we want to achieve. Healthcare might mean patient safety and compliance, so making sure the right drugs are getting administered to the right people and the right dosages. All right. Software is also a great example of how do we have reliable releases, automate the testing of our software, make sure that the correct versions are tracked, and that we have rollback plans in place. So it really can mean different things to different people. And the beauty of DocuWare is that the flexibility and the configurability of DocuWare means that it's not so much a niche solution for a specific industry for their quality management processes. It can really be adapted to anything. So a couple of typical pain points. I didn't introduce David in the beginning, but David has joined me on the call just to have a bit of a conversation. I will be asking him a few questions because he's had a couple of good experiences and engagements around quality management recently. So typical pain points that we've mentioned already: just scattered information, files on desktop and shared drives. There's emails flying around, approvals on those emails. We potentially have missing standard operating procedures during audits. If you're in a real quality management environment, you'll probably know that a lot of your documentation is Excel tracked, and you track the statuses of those documents, the names of those documents, all on an Excel sheet. And then you don't really know where the final version is. So if I can bring David into the conversation on the value and the benefit of solving these problems. David, I know I've got these 4 points in here. Can you maybe just give your experience of what the value would be of solving these problems?
Yeah, of course, Jamie. You know, we've been in interesting engagements with our customers. The latest one, we just implemented for a customer within the finance department to automate some processes, and they asked us if we can help within the quality environment, and they came back with a vendor onboarding form. Now, this is something that we would generally class as a payable environment or a finance process. But for the customer, this is such a critical compliance environment because they need to do specific checks and balances around subcontractors and vendors within the environment, which is part of the compliance process. So taking a look at certain pain points that customers have around compliance specifically could be so broad. But I mean, if we take a look at what content management means and what DocuWare means for our customers, it means I've got a workflow that forces me to work in a certain way. I've got an audit trail that reports to me about what happened on a document and who's approved something, and have I actually added this to an employee's HR file. And then, of course, I've got the version control and that security around the system that ensures that content is only accessed in a certain way. So if you take a look at that, those topics speak directly to compliance. So yes, absolutely. I mean, I think if we do typical pain points, we can most probably do 5 or 6 pages, because people within construction will have certain issues and they will have certain ways that they need to engage with certain content. And people within manufacturing or somebody within the services environment, our latest customer works in offshore rigs. So it becomes quite a broad topic. But we see the SOP management as a critical point, because this is where the compliance starts, and that's where the 9001 compliance starts. But I also need to prove to the auditors that my processes, even though well-defined within my policy, can also be enforced on DocuWare. And I think that's where the biggest benefit comes in, to fully automate the process and manage an electronic system.
Yeah. So I'm assuming we're going to get this question, and I think you've mentioned it there, is how does this help me become more compliant in my environment? This is a very common question. So I think if you want to elaborate on the compliance and the ISO 27001 and the 9001 specifically, does this just automatically make us compliant, or what's your opinion on that?
Would be lovely, eh? I've got some software now, I'm compliant. I mean, DocuWare is ISO 9001 compliant, with 27001 compliant, and there's another one I can't remember, 54981 or something, which is specifically related to records management. And then it comes with a whole host of other compliances that we've got to manage, right? We've got to manage our SOC 2 Type 2 compliance. We've got to manage specific German legislation, specific UK legislation, and US legislation, because we're a global company. And the only way that you can do that across all of these different certification bodies is to ensure that I'm using a product that helps me be compliant. Can I prove to the auditors that my processes are in place and the way that I manage my processes, rather than the fact that I'm using software that could make me compliant? So it is absolutely still critical that the processes are set up accurately. We obviously consult with our customers on this, and we help our customers on this, and we help them to set up processes that would be deemed compliant by auditors.
Fantastic. Yeah, again, like you mentioned there, compliance means different things to different people and in different scenarios. So there we've got a couple of good examples of what that means. Without further ado, I am going to jump into a little bit of a DocuWare demo. Okay, so I think keep in mind, I mentioned it in the beginning, the solution is completely configurable. Every customer we engage with has the nuances in their process that we need to adapt the solution to. This is purely an example of how we would use DocuWare in a compliant kind of way. And David alluded to it. It will be around SOP management. Here I'm going to generate a couple of SOPs. It's going to go through a bit of an approval process, and ultimately it's going to be read and accepted by the general staff within my organization. I also will jump into another one where I show you version control of a document and collaboration of a document, just so that you can picture everything is kind of centralized and done from one place. So, right. David, if you can't see my DocuWare screen, just tell me, but I'm assuming you can.
Yeah,
so this is just DocuWare for, I think, I wouldn't say most, but some people on the call probably seen the solution before, so I will go a bit slower for those that haven't. It is quite intuitive. I've got a general flow of what I need to do at the top here. So I've got a document tray. I won't be using that too much in this demo because that's for sort of pre-generated existing documents that I need to store and index in my system. I've got full search dialogues, so I will go through this in more detail. I'm able to search for any document at any time with any criteria. I have lists of information. This is going to be quite important. So my list can display any kind of information for me. And this is very important when I'm tracking where a document is within a particular process. Okay, I've got documents awaiting validation. I might have documents that are sent back to the editor of the document, and this could be pertinent to me or could be pertinent to the entire process as a whole if I'm overseeing that. So I can create multiple different buckets of information using my lists. But also importantly is the tasks. Once I start generating documents, I'm going to receive a couple tasks. I have 3 different profiles. The administrator profile, I've got Peggy Jenkins open here with no tasks, and I've got Elizabeth Cash open here with no tasks. What I'm going to do to start this process is use a DocuWare web form. Okay, a DocuWare web form, this is purely a way for me to generate a new document based on a document template that I have within my solution. So I'm going to call this the QMS webinar test. And I can have different categories of documents. Okay, this could be applicable if I want to categorize my documents in different environments within my organization. Different service lines, these are pretty generic, and there is only one selection of them for this demo. Languages, multiple different languages if that's required, and then I can select the specific template of a document. I'm going to submit this form. All right, what that's going to do is it's going to generate a task. Okay, that should pop through in a minute. you'll see immediately that one of my lists has already populated with an extra document, and I now have a writing task for this document. This is where I could potentially have the ability to assign it to a specific checker or approver. You'll see on the right-hand side, it's generated purely a template for me. As this document moves through the process, I start filling information in on the document. Now, there could be an entire 50-page document behind this, and I could fill information throughout the entire document. I'm just doing it on the cover page for the sake of this demo. I'm going to select my checker as Elizabeth, and I'm going to select my approver as Peggy. And then you can have groups of people that would ultimately need to read this document and acknowledge that they've read this document at the end of the process. This is quite important, and I think even in our environment, we've got multiple different standard operating procedures, and to prove compliance, you need to make sure that all your employees read those SOPs. So in my personal employee file cabinet within DocuWare, I have all of these SOPs that I've read and accepted, and then that is all auditable, and you can prove that. I'm going to confirm that. All right, this is going to go, and this is going to create obviously another task for Peggy and for Elizabeth, and we'll give that a second to come through. Okay, once that task comes through, Elizabeth will be assigned as the checker, and Peggy will be assigned as the validator. Okay, so wait for that to come through. Now, why this is very important as well is that we have specific roles for people. So everything within the DocuWare solution can be secured by role and by user. So I might specifically be a checker of documents in general, and that's something we can fix within our workflow too. And if David was specifically an approver, he would also be fixed as an approver in the workflow. Of course, speed would be an issue on the day that I need to do a webinar. So apologies for that. That should come through in a second. If I had to move on, and I'll come back to this once the tasks do process, and this might just be the speed of my VM, so I apologize for that. If I have to come back to my file cabinet within DocuWare, like I mentioned, I have multiple different SOPs in my staff file cabinet for DocuWare. So I could see one for mobile work. All right, this is our internal SOP, and as you can see, it was generated. It's got a heading, and of course, right at the end of the document, I have stamped this to say I've read, understood, and acknowledged this process. There is a whole history behind this document as well. So I'm able to view the workflow history of every single document. So this does come back down to the auditability of the documents. Everything is there. Everything that happened to this document throughout its life cycle is there. And I'll be able to extract that information and report on it and use it as proof when it comes down to audits. Okay. My next example is the version control and the collaboration of documents. So again, you'll see multiple environments. They just differ per use case, and they would be unique to each customer and organization. I have a couple engineering documents. All right. So if I search for my engineering documents here, and I open that one up, you'll see that this is purely just a Word document. I'm able to open this document up. If I wanted to see the version history of this document, you'll see that I've updated the version of this document multiple times over the last couple of months. All right. If I wanted to edit this document and I had the correct rights to edit this document, I would be able to select edit. Now we can edit both in native Office and in Office on the web or Microsoft 365. So the moment I click that, that is going to open the document up in Word in Office 365, and I'd be able to edit it. This gives me a very easy way to start collaborating on documents. All right, so I can go and say version 9 by Jamie, and then I can close that down again. As soon as I close that down, that is going to update the version in DocuWare with the latest version 9. You'll see there it's updated the version number to version 9, and it's made that the current version and put the previous one as an out-of-date status. So that is super easy for me to manage from a version perspective. If that had to be workflowed and I needed to send that off, we could create tasks and we could create a process flow to send that to somebody who did have the sufficient rights to edit it, and they would edit it and they would submit it back into the workflow and have completed their task of editing that version. So that just shows you that there's a couple of examples of what it means to better control your documents within your solution, and to make that process more streamlined and efficient. All right. So that kind of brings me to the end of DocuWare. I'm going to just execute a quick search for information to show you the different information that I have here. So searching is super easy. Again, this comes back to the audit question. How easy is it to find information? So I can search by documents that have multiple different approvers. I can search for different titles of documents, different statuses of documents. If I just executed a search here, it would show me all the documents that I have within my file cabinet. And you'll see that I've got a couple of drafts here, and I've got a couple final documents, so that shows me different statuses. And I can also drill down that status of the document itself. So if I wanted to only find for applicable documents, it's going to show me all the applicable documents that I have in my system. Now, obviously, from our testing, we've generated a lot of these, but you'll see that the latest applicable documents have all the information filled on the right-hand side throughout the process. Finding information has become a whole lot easier. And like I mentioned previously, the lists will continuously update for documents awaiting validation, my specific documents awaiting for validation. And then, of course, like I mentioned, you have oversight of everything. You've noticed that there are probably a couple other things here, like incident logging. This will be in the next episode of our series of quality management. We're going to start talking about CAPA processes and incident responses and how to apply CAPA across. So this would probably be more niche specific to an industry, but how to apply CAPA using DocuWare. Okay. David has already spoken about some success stories, and I'm going to jump straight to the Q&A right now. I'm going to have a look at any questions that are here in the box. All right. Okay, so David, I don't know if you want to jump back on and just help me answer a couple of these questions that I have here. Mm-hmm. So there's a question around integration, and I think I'm not going to ask it as it is, because this asks specifically for a type of system, an MES system, but I think we just need to talk on integration and how the solution integrates with different systems.
Yeah, DocuWare is, of course, a holistic ECM. Meaning that we've built in options into the product to be easily integratable into other solutions. I mean, we can read database entries automatically, and we can automatically link DocuWare to any Windows-based system through screen scrape technology, meaning that if I am on a QMS system or a compliance system or even a ticketing system, I can reference documentation stored in DocuWare with one click from this other system. We can also integrate through API layers quite easily, and we don't in most cases even need middleware. And we can call these applications directly from our workflow, which makes DocuWare quite integratable with any other solution. So if you are using DocuWare to reference information within other systems, or even retrieve SOPs that you have, or even take a look at process information or substitution lists or approvers or levels of approval within other systems, this can easily be achieved.
Perfect, thank you. I have another question here. Can I create different approval workflows for minor and major changes? Yes, I'll take this question. Thank you very much. Great question. Yes, absolutely. I think if you have a look at what I had open here, this is just an example, and I had to have a look at my version history here. My version numbers is currently set up as whole numbers, so this would indicate a major version change. So from version 8.0 to 9.0, we can incorporate the changes to minor versions as well. So potentially we're going from 8.0 to 8.1. That is a minor version change, just as an example. It is flexible. And yes, we can initiate different workflows based on the type of change, whether it's minor or major. I hope that answers your question. Then there's another question here. How does DocuWare deal with fillable forms? And what about Excel spreadsheets? All right, so there are two things to tackle on the forms. One is the use of DocuWare's forms. Right, so potentially making DocuWare your form solution. If you're talking about fillable forms or Adobe fillable forms, PDF fillable forms, if you had a fillable form, all right, you could still edit it outside of DocuWare and upload it back into DocuWare using the same edit functionality that you've seen. Okay. If it is already a pre-filled form, DocuWare would still be able to read the data using the OCR on the document tray to extract the data from the fillable form and use that within the workflow. In terms of Excel sheets, again, if you've got an Excel sheet stored within DocuWare and you wanted to edit it would open up an Excel, whether it's native to your PC or on Office 365, and it works exactly the same way as I've shown you on the Word side of things. So you'd be able to edit that Excel document. DocuWare can store over 800 different file types, so what we're storing in DocuWare doesn't matter. If it's an Office file or a PDF or a fillable PDF, you'll be able to edit it in the same fashion that I've showed. Pleasure. There's another question around security roles and rights. So I did mention this, that everything is locked down by security, but I'm going to let David take this one. David, can I control who sees what across all sites if I have multiple sites?
Yeah, we're actually busy with an implementation like that, where we have different rules across different sites. So actually a little bit different, because we've got a multi-level organization with different business units, but the business units don't do exactly the same work. Some of the policies are obviously shared across these businesses, but due to geographical regions and small changes in the way that we work, we have different ways of working. So that also addresses the way that my company functions rather than security alone. In DocuWare, I can drill down to the finer detail. Who can access a document, but maybe I want them to be able to know the document exists, but not even read it, or potentially read it and not edit it or make any changes to it. So I can literally create my permissions from such a perspective, or I can, of course, just completely hide information from users that they should not be able to access. And this is, of course, a massive compliance issue, right? Who can access my content? How secure is my content? And what happens if something goes wrong with my content? What is the processes that I have in place to mitigate such risks?
Thanks, David. I think that's all the questions we have currently. If you do want to ask more questions, you're welcome to. We're going to probably wrap things up now. If you need to ask more questions, my email address is on the screen, so just note that down. You're welcome to pop me an email. If you have any if you want a consultation or have any more questions, just communicate with me. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Other than that, thank you so much to everyone that's joined. David, thank you so much for your input, and I hope to be chatting to you guys all soon again.